All right, welcome into Mississippi State Live here in the voice of college football. Andrew Miller here on a Monday evening. Glad to be back with you guys. Got a fun show today. We're going to talk about the Bulldog wide receiver room entering spring for our next spring positional previews, and then talk about some of the other, just kind of do some quick hitters on the other MSU sports news of the weekend. I also guess there's big news within the state of Mississippi that I really haven't gotten a chance to dive into just yet. So I don't know how much I can give a deep dive on that here at the moment. But yeah, glad to be back here on the Monday. Should be a good show. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and have the notifications turned on so you do know when we do go live. But we typically go live Monday, 6 p.m. Central Time. Obviously, I'm a few minutes late here, but also Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Time. That Thursday, those tend to be our call-in show, an opportunity for you guys to come be a part of the action, give whatever thoughts you have on the Bulldogs, and come and chat it up, talk about whatever you want. Tell me why my takes are wrong if you would like to as well. Get into any of that stuff that you would like. And you also have the ability to catch Mississippi State Live. Again, this is still probably a little bit of a lie because I still have not figured out the the Apple Podcast thing, but you're supposed to be able to listen to the show on your favorite audio platforms. I know we're on Spotify. I did not check again on Apple if that had gotten corrected yet. I need to make sure I send the right message to get that fixed. I forgot to check on that, but I also understand some of you guys don't get to tune in live, want to go back and listen to the show. You don't have to go into YouTube unless you want to see this. This is very white right now. This whole scene. I've got a white shirt, white background, white man, white light. This is a bit blinding. Also, the beard is just all over the place right now. If for whatever reason you wanted to see all those things, even if you don't catch the show live and come back and see that, obviously we love to bring you guys to YouTube. Definitely love the YouTube viewership being up as high as we possibly can get it. But I know it can also be much more convenient to use your favorite streaming platforms if that would be your preference. So don't think that you have to only come to YouTube to listen to the show. We are out there streaming as well. But happy to be back. I say that like I'm on a hiatus. I was here Thursday. It's not, we're on the normal schedule. Should be a good show. And what we're going to get into is more spring positional talk. We've talked about the quarterback room. We talked about the running back room. We'll stay on the offensive side of the ball and get into the Bulldog wide receivers, because I think that's going to be a fun, interesting group to talk about here. It's interesting. If you go back to this time a year ago, I was a little bit sneaky. Pessimistic was not the right word, but cautious when it came to – it was not cautiously optimistic. I was cautious about being optimistic when it came to the state receiver room, because I felt they were losing a lot of talent in that room and it was being overblown a little bit. Kevin Coleman, I've said it many times, I think Kevin Coleman is as talented as any receiver Mississippi State has had come through the program. His play really, really impressed me. And obviously we've seen it now through the NFL draft process. He's been a guy that has seen his stock increase. We've seen a Mississippi State receiver from this year see his stock increase in the NFL draft as well. We'll hit on that a little bit later. But Coleman, a guy that I was very, very high on, and I thought losing him was a pretty significant blow, but some of the other guys lost in the room as well. Mario Craver, off the field issues aside, very talented player. And you see the season he was able to have for Texas A&M, and I felt it was being a little bit underblown, or the loss that you had with him. I thought Kelly Akari played well down the stretch of the 2024 season. So State was losing quite a bit in that receiver room, and the guys they brought in were not proven pieces. Your two most notable additions out of the portal were Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans. If it's possible I'm forgetting somebody else. I guess Aiden Williams, frankly, those were your three guys, which when it was all said and done, those end up being your three starting receivers. But there were three guys where it was all an idea of talent and potential and flashes as opposed to any on-field proven production. Brennan Thompson had opportunities at Oklahoma, limited opportunities in kind of a crowded receiver room when it came to his sophomore season in 2023. Those few opportunities he had, made the most of. Looked like a very impressive player. But only got a handful of opportunities. The next year had the chance to see a greater increased workload with all the injuries, but didn't see the production uptick. And it was like, okay, we know that was a dysfunctional offense with terrible quarterback play, terrible offensive line play, which hurts the passing game, and also just poor play calling in general. Is this a case of Brennan Thompson, like he was given a bigger role but couldn't make the most of it? Or if he gets in the right offense, he's really going to blossom? At the time, we didn't know. Anthony Evans, a guy that's like, okay, State needs a slot type in the offense because they don't really have a proven guy there. This is a true slot type wide receiver. A few flashes at Georgia, a few impressive explosive plays, a guy that you felt could make an impact in the return game, a guy that you felt could be involved as a gadget player because that's the way he was used in Athens. But you're talking about a guy going into his junior year of college football who had still maybe a redshirt junior, actually, but a guy who still hadn't really done much of anything. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's Georgia, right? They've got a lot of talented players, but Georgia's receiver room was kind of a question in 2024. And, if this a guy that is this a case of he's not on the field because they got other guys ahead of him that they like better and just there's not an opportunity, but he's still really talented? Or is it a case of a guy that if he were good enough to play, he'd be getting on the field? These are the questions we had because we didn't know these things at the time. And then Aiden Williams is the other big addition that you brought in. And obviously they brought in a ton of transfer receivers. Just all those other guys ended up being, frankly, wasted spaces, if we're just being honest. Super talented player. We knew this, a guy who had every clip of him out of practices at Ole Miss was like, hey, this guy is a big-time player. Like, when's the Aiden Williams breakout in Oxford going to happen? And it didn't happen. And it was easy to say, all right, look, Ole Miss, we know they've been loaded at receiver. Coming to Mississippi State where there's more of an opportunity, he can really have a chance to shine. But can he do it? Is he going to do it at this point? We hadn't seen it yet. So there was potential in State's receiver room going into last season, but we didn't know for sure what you truly had. And I think a lot of people were optimistic solely off the fact that it's like, hey, man, Jeff Levy, when does he not have good receiver play? And that's a totally fair point. And it was something that I think coming out of the spring, I felt better about the group. Some of the things that we were hearing that Brennan Thompson had stepped in and was a leader right away, that Blake Shapen and Anthony Evans had a very good connection right away. And the spring game, guys like Aiden Williams, but also Frisco McGee making plays. And at the time, Jordan Mosley as well had shown flashes the year before, and you thought, okay, can he see a bigger role step forward? I think you felt okay that receiver was going to get figured out. They would be fine there. Would they have game changers at receiver? It ended up being the best 1-2 punch you've had at receiver in quite some time. I guess from an explosive standpoint, obviously the air raid was a different offense. They weren't trying to hunt those explosive plays. Leach had very talented receiver rooms, though, top to bottom. But I guess air raid notwithstanding, State had a lot of years where maybe they had one receiver who was solid, but they didn't have a lot of guys. You got it last year. Brennan Thompson had the breakout season that he was always waiting for. 57 catches, school record 1,054 yards. 18.5 yards per reception is incredible. 6 touchdowns. Also, I believe, ran for a score. And as we all know, this guy could have been a 1,500-yard receiver if you had better quarterback play. And the offensive line play, I know that's a part of it as well, that if he had gotten better if Shapen or Camario, for that matter, had better blocking up front, giving them more time to get those throws down the field, he could have had more yards. But also just with the offensive line the way it was, if the quarterbacks just hit him downfield, he would have had more receptions, would have had an even bigger season. Maybe you're talking about a guy that could have he probably would not have gotten All-American honors because we know how this works out. He's still not a household name, but could have easily been. I think he ended up second or third team All-SEC. I think it would have clearly been a first team All-SEC performer if he had gotten the fair share of targets, if he had gotten the receptions that he was open for. Just better throwing balls. I mean, how many times did he have to stop himself or go dive and make an incredible catch? He made some really impressive plays over the course of the season. And obviously, we'll talk more about Brennan later in the show, just from what he did at the Combine. But you had Anthony Evans impress as well. Takes over that slot role, leads the team with 67 receptions, 831 yards, 12.4 per reception. So not a ton of big plays with him, although he had definitely had some big receptions as well. 4 touchdowns, which was third on the team. Seydou Traore at tight end at 5. But easily another guy that there were times probably could have had a few more big plays, but where Brennan was the, hey, this is the guy that we're taking a shot down the field, we're going to is our big play threat. Evans was sort of your consistent, like when we have to go get a reception, who are we going to? A lot of times they were going to Anthony Evans, which was something that they lost with Kevin Coleman. That was one of my biggest concerns was when it's third down and you've got to throw the football and you've got to have it, who can you go to and trust to make that reception? Kevin Coleman in 2024, despite all the issues with that offense and that team, the dude found a way to get open and catch the football. Can Anthony Evans be that consistent, reliable target? He showed some of that last year and became that player for State. So those two gave you an outstanding 1-2 punch. You knew going into almost every single game, State was going to have two threats at receiver that were really good players. And Evans, not to sell him short, he was a deep threat as well. They didn't use him that way as much, but they could. So you had the pieces in the receiving core. And if you've got two guys at receiver who can really stress a defense, that tends to be enough to be functional offensively. I mean, sometimes you can get away with one. But when you got two guys that are real legitimate threats to get the football, you tend to be in a pretty good place on offense, assuming everything else is where it needs to be, which for State it really wasn't. Those two were fantastic. Now the questions came where you were after that. Aiden Williams, as I mentioned earlier, he took over the starting role halfway through the season. 21 catches, 252 yards, didn't have a touchdown. There were some times that he was open and was missed by both quarterbacks. Also, but he didn't get a lot of opportunities down the field. How much of that was they were not asking him to be that guy down the field? It just wasn't the role that they were looking for. How much of that is Chapin and or Camario not having the connection with him to feel comfortable with those reps consistently? Or is that just, Aiden Williams isn't that guy? Now, if you go back to spring, he was getting big play after big play, at least in the spring game. But you didn't really see it on the field. That said, he took a starting role because he was, frankly, more consistent than the guy that he took the job from, Jordan Mosley. Mosley was more of the big play guy, but only 8 catches for 168, 1 touchdown. Basically had a big game against Alcorn State, and that was it. Which it was a disappointing year for JMO. I know there were some higher expectations for him coming into the year to take a step forward, and it just didn't really happen. I think Aiden's consistency is what led him to get the job. I've talked about it a lot. I think Aiden is the best blocker they had in that receiver room, which helped them out to hit some of those plays out wide that they were not always hitting earlier in the season when he wasn't on the field. But that was kind of it at receiver. Ricky Johnson, there was a ton of hype going into the season for him. A lot of talk that Ricky Johnson was tearing it up in practices. Caught 3 passes for 17 yards in the season. He's transferred out. Marcus Allen was the most productive receiver State brought into the portal. 1 catch for 7 yards. Now, Frisco McGee, a guy that, again, we talk about players that have gotten a lot of talk in the offseason. And I shouldn't go too deep into this because I'm going to hit this when I go through the room as it stands going into the spring. But a guy who had shown a lot of flashes in spring, all the talk of, man, Frisco McGee, when he gets his opportunity, he's going to shine. Didn't get a ton of those chances, but 5 catches, 80 yards, and then the bowl game has the big 30-plus yard reception on that glance route for a touchdown with Brennan Thompson out with an injury. Stepped in and stepped up and flashed that potential. You didn't have a true number 3, though, after the top 2 guys. How much do you need to have a true number 3? That's debatable. But it ended up being a very good room, all things considered. The top 2 is about as good as State has had it. In terms of production, I don't know State's had a 1-2 that has been as productive as what they got with Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans. I mean, I just looking back, because I know in 2024 they didn't. Obviously, Thompson set a school record, but 2021, yeah, even that year, total number of receptions is higher because it was the air raid. But 2021, where you have Mekhi Polk go for 1,000 yards, Jaden Wally was second at 628 yards. Leach's final year, the guys, they kind of spread out the touches a lot more across the top. Your leading receiver was Ra Thomas with 626 yards. And Rufus led them in receptions with 53. The 2014 team, which I don't have the numbers in front of me because college football stats doesn't automatically go back that far. They were more spread out, obviously, with Darunya Wilson, Fred Ross, Jamion Lewis, Robert Johnson, Joe Morrow. I mean, Fred Brown. I think of the top three. I think it was Brown was in the top 3 or top 4. Had a lot of guys get the football, and Darunya, I think, had 40-something catches to lead the team with 600-something yards. And obviously the next year they kind of spread touches around quite a bit. You had 2 guys go over like 900 yards receiving. But in terms of 1-2 punch, probably best since those the mid-teens when you had Dak Prescott at quarterback. It was a good group when you came into the year with expectations kind of questioning, okay, well, how great is it going to be? So now we go into the 2026 season. How quite good can this group be? And I think when you look at the state receiver room going into 2026 for the spring, you're in a more proven situation than you were a season ago at this time, because you've got a guy back in Anthony Evans that has proven production, has done it in the SEC. You've got another starter back in Aiden Williams who was, consistent, but was not very productive and kind of was just a role player in that receiver room. After that, I think you've got some promising options coming in through the transfer portal. You've got some promising guys on the roster, most notably Frisco McGee. And then you got some freshmen coming in that are very promising as well, although for the spring specifically, which is what we're focusing on now, only one of those freshmen enrolling early. We'll talk about him a little bit later as well. I think there's, again, a high ceiling for this room. There's probably a higher floor than what you had a season ago, because you come into this knowing we've got a guy who has shown he can do it in the SEC with Anthony Evans. What do you have beyond him, and how good that group becomes is sort of what the question is going to be for this group. And you're hoping to get some of those answers in the spring with the new pieces stepping in, with the guys coming back on the roster, who steps up, who solidifies themselves as the clear number 2 target of this team, who fills the Brennan Thompson role within the offense of being the guy that's consistently taking the top off the defense. And I don't expect anyone to do it at the same rate that Brennan did, because Brennan was a special player, especially when you talk about his speed, as we just saw at the NFL Combine. But can you have someone play a similar role to that and do so consistently? Can you find a true number 3 receiver? Those are things we're hoping to get figured out in the spring. So let's dive into this room a little bit. And again, you start with Anthony Evans because you've got a guy back who's got that proven production. And I already rounded off the stats: 67 catches, 831 yards, 4 touchdowns. Very good season for him. Got a few rushing attempts as well. Was a punt returner for the Bulldogs, so they didn't get a ton of big plays in that. I think he had like the one big punt return against Alcorn, maybe. And that was kind of it for him for the year. But a guy that can help you in special teams, a guy that can play a gadget-type role if you want to get him involved. In jet sweeps. They lined him up in the backfield some last season and tried to hit him on routes out of the backfield. You could throw those swing passes to him. But also a guy that showed, as I talked about earlier, the ability to work the middle of the field and kind of be a possession receiver. And when State was in a have-to-have-it situation, they kind of went to Evans. And he primarily worked that short to intermediate passing game, but has the ability to win one-on-one down the field as well. They would put him out wide. Whenever they would get into those 2 tight end sets, they would keep Evans and Thompson as the 2 receivers on the field, and they would split Evans out. And what they're doing is, obviously, this is an offense that, regardless of what your personnel package is, you always kind of create those one-on-one opportunities on the outside because of the spacing of it all. But especially when you go 2 tight end and you bring those 2 tight ends tight to the formation, now as a defense, you're saying, okay, they've got to look favorable to run the football. We've got to be aggressive in how we defend the run against these looks. We want our safeties playing a little bit more downhill. But we're also, those receivers are truly out on an island because, again, when State would go 2 tight, it was rare that they would have anybody flexed out, to either slot. Sometimes they would do it with Sadu, but typically they would kind of get into those double wing type sets where you have 2 tight ends tight to the formation. So you've got all those bodies in tight to the line of scrimmage, tight to the center of the field, and the 2 receivers split outside the numbers. this is a true one-on-one opportunity. And obviously, Brennan Thompson, you know that he's going to win in those chances, but Anthony Evans would win in those opportunities as well. You remember the first big play of the game against Florida. It's one of those deals where they're in a 12 personnel formation and they get the shot to Anthony Evans over top out wide. And he makes a great catch against current Bulldog corner Jamrock Grimsley when he makes that play. He's got the speed and the ability to win one-on-one, so you can move him around a little bit. Obviously, he's primarily going to be your slot receiver. That's where he's most effective, but you can put him out wide, and he can be very successful in that spot as well. I think State's got a lot of bodies who can handle that, but I would imagine, once again, when you see State get into 12 personnel situations, they're not going to pull Anthony Evans off the field just because he's a slot receiver. They'll simply put him out wide and let him try to win in those opportunities. I think the biggest thing to watch with Ant is, for him, how does his relationship with Kamario Taylor continue to grow? There were some times last year where you could tell those two were not fully on the same page from a timing standpoint. A couple of plays against I know in the Egg Bowl there were a few plays. The Egg Bowl was kind of where stood out. He had a couple drops and a couple misses. You really want to see if those two can get on the same page consistently. I think it was kind of the same way in the bowl game. I'm trying to remember how the bowl game didn't have a huge game, if I remember correctly. No, he had the big catch against – I forgot. He had the one big reception in the bowl game, 4 catches for 80 yards. It was actually his most yards since the Arkansas game. But if you remember against Ole Miss, it was the one game that he was held without a catch. The only game he was held under 4 receptions for the game. So, 4 catches, 27 yards against Georgia. That's another game where Kamario was involved quite a bit. How their relationship grows is going to be kind of the big thing to watch when it comes to Anthony Evans. And if he can become that reliable target and the time he can get down between Kamario and Ant, I think it's going to be a really big year, and he's going to have a chance to be a 1,000-yard receiver for the Bulldogs. He obviously led the team in receptions a season ago, but that's going to be the next thing to watch. And part of it is also a Kamario thing as well, because as we mentioned, yes, Ant can win one-on-one down the field, but Ant is mostly that guy that they're working short to intermediate. Well, that's the part of the field where Kamario was still trying to grow as a quarterback, and is going to have to continue to grow as a quarterback. Kamario is best just ripping it downfield, pure arm strength. His short intermediate passing game is where he kind of saw that some of the inaccuracy, the timing not quite there. That's something that's going to have to grow. And if that can happen, I think Anthony Evans is going to be in for a really big season. But you give yourself a high floor because you know you're going into the year. We've got a guy that can be productive within the SEC. Who complements him? And we'll go to the portal first, because State brought in a couple portal receivers. And the guy that I think the most attention is on, and the player that I think there's a lot of expectations for, is Marquise Johnson, who comes over from Missouri. This is a guy that for his career with the Tigers in 3 seasons, 66 catches for 1,075 yards and 6 touchdowns. Had a few rushing attempts as well. Didn't do much there. 5'11", 180, so another smaller guy, but a speed guy. I believe clocked at a 4.27 40, like official. So a guy who is supposed to be a very fast player, and a guy that's supposed to be a big play threat. As a true freshman at Missouri, really had his best season. Fewest number of receptions, but his most yards and his most touchdowns. 13 catches for 383 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's 29.5 yards per reception. So he had a lot of big plays his first year for Mizzou, and that was sort of his role within that offense, as we are taking the deep shots downfield to you. And that was a Missouri team that had some good guys in the receiver room. Luther Burden was there. I believe Theo Weiss was there. They had a talented group of receivers. And he was not going to be the primary guy, but he played that role as the guy that, hey, a couple times a game, we're going to take a deep shot to you. And he had a big season as a true freshman because of it. And I think there were higher expectations on him coming into the next year. Kind of saw the workload increase a little bit, was still sort of supposed to be the deep threat guy, but the offense just sort of took a little bit of a step back. He had more receptions, 25, but his yardage went down to 352, so 14 yards per catch. Only the 1 touchdown. Now, he had a big breakout game. Their bowl game against Iowa, he went, I think it was the Music City Bowl that year. I believe he went over 100 yards, had a touchdown. I think his touchdown was in that game. really impressive season that the thought was, okay, he's going to be the guy. And that was, I think some Mizzou's top receivers were out of that game. Really had a chance to be featured. High expectations for him going into this past season. But again, it was kind of the same deal. Missouri's offense just didn't do him a lot of favors. Again, the yards per reception went down. 28 catches, but 340 yards, so just over 12 yards a catch. Had 2 touchdowns. Caught a couple big passes for them early in the season, but as the year went along, really just didn't get involved much. And I think Mizzou started kind of moving to a couple other guys. Had some frustrations. He expressed that with Bo Pribula. He's the guy that kind of very famously, if you watch that Missouri game against Alabama, Mizzou has a 4th down at the end of the game looking to try to go and win the ball game. And he is wide open for a 1st down. And Pribula just never sees him. And, Marquise Johnson kind of losing his mind over there where he was wide open. But, his time there is done. That offense didn't suit him well. I preamble all that to now go in and say, he's going to be well suited for what Jeff Lebby wants to do offensively. This is a big play threat, a true speed threat, a guy that plays on the outside, and a guy that is able to consistently win one-on-one. And one of the things that I think he does a little bit different than Brennan, because he's not as fast as Brennan. I know, 4.27 is what he's listed as, I guess, and I believe that is supposed to be an official time. I'd imagine he's probably more in the 4.3 range, because I feel like a lot of those college times, even if they say they're laser timed, are a little bit inflated. And I do think Brennan just has more pure speed, but a slightly bigger frame and a guy that I think could be a little bit more physical at the point of attack, a guy that can kind of go up for the football more. That's something you saw quite a bit. We talked about Brennan, how many times he had to go and adjust to the football, which led to what should have been touchdowns turning into just really big plays. The same thing happened for Marquise Johnson. Both Brady Cook and then Bo Pribula throwing inaccurate passes. Johnson just has to go up for the football, and he showed the ability to win in those kind of contested catch situations. And could made some really impressive grabs, both going up for the ball, also diving down for the ball, adjusting in the air. So a good catch radius on him, despite not being the biggest guy. But again, a bigger frame than what you had with Brendan Thompson. But I think he's the guy that you expect to step in and fill this role. Very explosive player. And I think a great fit for what you want to do offensively. You fully expect he's stepping in and winning one of these starting jobs. And he's one of the guys, if you're just talking about players to watch in the spring as a whole, I know we talked specifically freshmen in the last episode. Season as a whole, he's a guy that you definitely want to – the team as a whole, a guy definitely going to want to keep close eyes on in the spring because of the potential there. Other transfer that comes in, Zion Ragens out of Oklahoma, a redshirt sophomore, 5'8", 170. Former 4-star, another track guy. I mean, the Brennan Thompson mold, like a 10.3, 10.38 runner in the 100-meter dash in high school. Big-time speed guy with a small frame. Goes to Oklahoma, would have been recruited by Lebby into that offense. And as a true freshman, had to make 5 starts and was thrust into action. Oklahoma had like 5 receivers get injured that year, and Harris was a guy that had to step in and saw some starting opportunities. Now, didn't have the production there, didn't get thrown to quite a bit. As we've talked about with Brendan Thompson that year in 2024, that offense was just dysfunctional top to bottom. And a receiver not putting up big numbers in that specific year of Oklahoma's offense clearly is not indicative of ability. We saw with Brennan, those guys can make a bigger role. Now, for a guy that's got that speed, was not necessarily asked to be a deep threat for OU. All of his receptions were kind of underneath. And just didn't get involved in a lot of big plays, didn't get a ton of targets, ton of opportunities. But a guy that in the few chances that he got looked like he actually has a pretty good catch radius for his size, can go up and snag the football. The big thing with him is speed, right? And we know that's what Jeff Lebby is going to favor. That's what Jeff Lebby wants out of his guys is I want guys who can go win one-on-one. I want fast guys at receiver. That's what they're going to recruit over anything else. Ragens is the guy that I made the dumb joke about online that people got very upset about over on Gene's page. Because I was like, can we please get one starting quality lineman? And it's like, nope, you're going to take another 5'8", 170 receiver who runs a 4.3 if you're Jeff Lebby. It was a joke. look, does not have nearly the same production as what you would have had from Brennan Thompson coming in, but you're profiling that type of player. And I don't know what his role is going to be this year. I mean, I imagine he's going to play. I think he'll probably be one of State's backups on the outside. Could potentially compete for a starting job. But another fast guy. And will Levy move him into the slot maybe? I don't know. That's the other thing we'll talk about here in a sec. Kind of got to figure out who your guys are going to be at slot receiver, because that's where you don't have as much experience to this point after Anthony Evans. You don't really have any true slot guys. You have a slot guy on the roster, but you don't have a lot of guys that have played there exclusively. He played outside when he was at Oklahoma. The profile Jeff Levy has shown to this point is he doesn't care if a guy is short and doesn't care if he's not got a big frame. If you run 4-3, I'm putting you on the outside because I want to get you those one-on-one matchups. I'd imagine that's how Zion Rage is going to be used, but we'll see. So 2 transfers coming in, one where you're banking on the ceiling, one that's got shown some production and some flashes where you can say, all right, in this system, you're going to thrive. Both of them, though, fit the profile of what you want for a receiver within this offense. For the guys returning on the roster, you start with Anthony. I keep wanting to say Anthony Evans. You start with Aiden Williams, right? Because he gets a little bit of that opportunity last season. Kind of takes over as a starter midway through the year, taking Jordan Mosley's job. And I know I already talked about this earlier, but I think it was a consistency thing that Levy felt compared to J-Mo. He was the more consistent receiver of the two. I thought when he did get targeted, he was pretty sure-handed, and I thought he was pretty physical. Probably one of the more physical receivers State had. I've said it many times, the best blocker in that group, which was a benefit to them, and having that on the field was helpful. But certainly not the player that he has been billed to be to this point in his career. But you remember what he was coming out of high school, and he was the top-ranked receiver in the state of Mississippi. Goes to Ole Miss, and I think, as a true freshman, showed flashes, got a few opportunities, thought he was really going to take a bigger step forward in 2024, and it just didn't happen for him. You would see the clips come out from him in practices, and it's like, dude, this guy can play, which at this point, I think people do need to understand, just because the practice tape looks incredible doesn't always mean anything. I've seen that with a few State guys. They'll post their practice clips, and then a bunch of our fans like, what on earth is Levy doing? Why was this guy not in the game? Like, it's not like the coaches don't see these guys in practice. Let's be honest. But there was thought, like, okay, crowded receiver room at Ole Miss, comes to Mississippi State. Can he be the guy to really break out? And in the spring, you thought that was going to happen. Had a huge spring game. Really had a pretty good connection with Camario, it looked like. They would have gotten a lot of reps together with the other guys on the roster sort of being the first teamers. It just didn't really translate to the games. And again, he was playing for State. I thought with what he was asked to do, I thought he played well. And as I mentioned, there were some missed opportunities to him. You didn't see the explosive plays, though, which if you're a receiver in this offense, you kind of want a guy that can hit those explosive plays. That's a part of it. He's supposed to have it in him. Can he be that guy? This is the last chance, right? This is year 4 for him. He is a senior. This is the last go at it. At this point, I kind of lean towards Aiden Williams is who he is. Now, maybe, though, it finally clicks and he really fully puts it together. Maybe Shapen, when he was in, just felt better about Thompson and Evans. And especially when you know Brennan Thompson's always going to be open downfield, and then Anthony Evans is going to be your safety blanket, and you also know you don't really have a lot of time to do much else. Why would you not run plays designed to scheme those two open and target those two? That's a fair point, to be honest. He could have more of an opportunity this year. But if he doesn't take hold, I think the guy who's nipping at his heels is Frisco McGee, who obviously was a signee in Levy's first year, was kind of like the hidden gem of that receiver class where there was all the talk about Stonka Burnside, J.J. Harrell, Mario Craver. And Craver obviously made a big impact as a true freshman, but Harrell dealt with an injury, red shirts, transfers out. Stonka gets good playing time, but as a receiver, just wasn't able to get much of anything going. Shines in special teams, and it's like, hey, man, you need to be playing safety, move him to safety. Red shirts this past year. Now he's going to Memphis where he's going to play receiver. And obviously Craver transfers out. The 3 guys who were your 3 4-star receivers from that class all gone. Frisco McGee's the one guy that's back, and Frisco's the one guy that was always talked about, man, makes big-time plays. The guy can make some really impressive catches. He's going to be a special guy when it all comes together. And just was never getting on the field until finally you see it live in a game against Wake Forest in the bowl game, makes that big play, gets the one big opportunity, and he makes the absolute most of it. Should we let that one play tell us if that's the player that he is? No. But we've heard a ton about this guy. He took full advantage of the opportunity he was given, which some of these other guys we've heard about haven't done that. You know, a guy like Ricky Johnson that transferred out, we heard a ton of good things about Ricky Johnson. Ricky never did anything when he did get in a game. Had a couple catches. That was it. And I'm not trying to dog Ricky Johnson. He's at Utah now. We'll see what happens with him playing for Chad Bumpus again. But Frisco, at least in the one big chance he got, made the most of it. Now, what does that look like going into this year? And can he take over? And he looks like a more explosive player than what you've seen from Aiden Williams at this point. I think that's going to be a really tight battle for that starting outside receiver spot opposite of, I'm assuming Marquise Johnson's got one of those jobs taken care of. But that's going to be a big battle for sure. And Frisco is a guy I'm very excited to see going into the spring. And that's going to be a close battle to watch. A couple other guys on the roster, just to mention briefly, I talked about in the slot, they don't have a true proven option after Anthony Evans. I think Grayson Harris is your guy there. I mean, he was listed as a slot receiver a season ago. I think he's your number 2 going into the season. Was a good get for State. You know, they got him, flipped him from Oklahoma in last year's class. Didn't really get much of an opportunity this past year. I think caught one pass in the bowl game. But can he take another step forward? Bull Mitchell, another guy they signed last season, 5'11", 210. I mean, dude, go play running back, although State doesn't really need him. But that was another guy that State signed going into last season. He's back again. Can he take another step forward? It's going to be an opportunity. And then Matt Mayfield as JUCO signee, 6'2", 185, very fast, was a big play threat for Colin last season. You know, didn't get a ton of catches, ton of opportunities, but was sort of their big play guy in that offense. Still very raw as a player and needs some development to this point. It's kind of been a journey getting him to Starkville. But look, a ton of athleticism, big frame. You know, that's one of the things I didn't really talk about with Frisco, with Aiden Williams. Those are some of your bigger frame receivers. You'd like to have a guy like that, a rangy guy to play on the outside. Can Matt Mayfield fill that role? It's possible. Now, last guys we'll talk about a receiver, last guy. You know, State brought in 4 signees at the receiver position in this class. A really good receiver group, probably one of the best receiver signing classes based on what actual film that we've seen in quite some time. Only one of those guys enrolled in the spring, though, and I talked about him in our last show for freshmen to watch in the spring. And while he's probably the guy that has gotten, you could argue, the least talked about of the 4, the fact that he's here in the spring tells you that he may get a leg up on the guys, and that's Keemian Henderson out of Carthage, Texas. I can't talk. 6'4", 190, another big frame receiver on the outside. Explosive player, big play threat in high school. A lot of range. I'm going to be curious to see him in the spring. And I talked about this, I know, back on Thursday. Can he take advantage of this opportunity that, hey, there's spots available at receiver because you don't have outside of Anthony Evans, you don't have a proven guy in that room. Truly proven. Aiden is proven to an extent, but a proven guy that you would say that is a surefire go-to receiver in the SEC, you have one. Who do you have after that? There's going to be an opportunity for Keemian Henderson. And I think to get a leg up, even though guys like Jaden Creation, Zion Crumpton, even Camden Capehart, I've probably gotten more hype around them because of some of the production. And also those guys were in the class a lot longer. Henderson was a late ad going into this year's class. He's here for the spring. So can he take advantage and get those reps early on? We'll see. I think it's a good group. I think once those other freshmen I mentioned get in, it's going to get even better. They need some guys to step up for sure. You need to know that you got a guy, at least one, that you can consistently trust to get open downfield and be that threat to stretch the defense. But I think they've got too many options for that to not come through. I feel very good about Marquise Johnson being that guy. I think they've got a good chance that this is the year you have a true number 3 that you can kind of count on a little bit more. So, because look, if it's not going to be Aiden Williams, I think Frisco McGee can challenge. I think one of these freshmen coming in has the ability to challenge. Maybe it's Zion Ragens coming in as a transfer. There's a lot of potential in this room. I think it's going to be a good group. Maybe not the same ton of experience that you would love, but I think State's in a good spot at receiver, and you can trust this to be a productive group overall. Oh, my goodness. Woo. I've been hitting the Diet Coke a lot in this one because my goodness. My voice is going out of me. I've been dealing with stuff for about a week now, just with battling like coughing, sore throat, stuff like that. I'm on the come down from it right now, but sitting around and talking 40 minutes straight on the pod, and I got some more that I'm going to go into here. Not necessarily easy. Do want to real quick though take a minute to talk about the merch here at the Voice of College Football. We have a great merch store on the website. That is, let me just copy the link and post it in the comments. So that'll come up. I'll show that real quick. So you got the link there in the comments, in the live chat if you want to go check it out. But yeah, got a great merch store, great collection of hats, some T-shirts. As I mentioned, this shirt right here, we got that maroon color. We'll have the Bulldogs. Got the polo, the mug, the koozie, sweatshirt, tumbler, ton of great gear. So definitely go check it out if you want to continue repping the Voice of College Football brand. A lot of great gear there. Be a part of the network. Okay. Is that the right one? No, it's not. This is the right one. I'm still figuring out some of the controls here on the site. Just some other notes for Mississippi State sports where we'll talk Brennan Thompson, NFL Combine, 4.26, top time of the 40-yard dash in this year's Combine. Was a popular pick to get it done, and yeah, he went and got it done. By 100th of a second, Lorenzo Styles Jr. for Ohio State, the defensive back, ran a 4.27. Also, it was kind of funny seeing Xavier Thomas go and run a 4.28. It's like, oh, my goodness. And then Brennan comes right back after. That would have been tough if Xavier ended up running faster. But Brennan came out, was a little bit slower on the second attempt, 4.3, wasn't able to better it. But look, he ran a big time, ran a great time. It's kind of funny. For as good as the get-off was, if he had just like the 10-yard split, he was like 1.54 in the 10-yard split because they were comparing him to Xavier Worthy, who obviously has the record at 4.21. And that's the one difference. The difference is the 10-yard split was Worthy's able to get up to it was like 19 plus miles per hour within the first 10. It was like a 1.4 something in the 10-yard split. Brennan was about a tenth of a second behind him. But the rest of the way, Brennan was really the faster and hit a higher total speed. Basically was running 24 miles per hour. Look, we know the guy can fly. He's been a special player for State, and love to see him be in the spotlight. And the attention that comes with being the fastest 40-yard dash at the Combine is great. It's great pub for Brennan. It's great pub for Mississippi State. And I have to think he helped his draft stock out. Now, look, I mean, everybody knew he was fast. Like I said, a lot of the teams expected, or a lot of the scouts expected him to be the top 40-yard dash runner. Didn't really do any other drills. I don't think he did any other of the testing drills. And I didn't see any clips. I'm sure he did like the routes on air and the gauntlet, but I didn't see any clips of it. So I don't know how that went for him. I know the other drills are things that probably don't highlight his skill set the best, which kind of the thing you see now at the Combine. This was something that a lot of draft analysts were getting a little bit annoyed with is every single one of these guys, their agents tell them, like, look, if you're not going to put a great number up in this drill, don't do it. And it was like everybody's talking about it's the fastest year ever for the 40-yard dash. We had record times across the board in terms of the average. And it's like, yeah, it's not because all the guys got faster. It's because all the slow guys don't run anymore. But, same goes for the other drills. Look, we know Brennan's not a guy that's going to tear it up from a vertical jump or three-cone drill. I mean, he could do that well. I don't know. But his thing is speed, and speed is what sells, and he's going to have a roster spot because of it. And he could be a day 2 pick because of it. I don't think he's going to get in the round 1 conversations. At his size and just with if you read up on the scouting reports, the things that come up is like he's not the sharpest as a route runner, whatever. Teams are not going to spend a first-round pick on him, but because he has a very defined role at the next level, and that is the guy who is supposed to take the top off of defense. However, that is incredibly valuable to the point that I think he'll be a day 2 pick. If you were able to consistently get open one-on-one against SEC cornerbacks and post 1,000-yard season, as we said, should have been a 1,500-yard season in the SEC as a deep threat, you can do it in the NFL. And I thought there was an interesting point. This was talking about Nate Tice of Yahoo, who does a great job covering the draft. He was actually talking about Jeremiah Love and the running back position because of Love's ability to create explosives. And he was talking a lot about how NFL teams these days are really searching for guys who can create the explosive plays. They've always searched for it, but it's especially prevalent now because NFL defenses, there's been all the talk about the too high defense and taking away the big passing plays. And, oh my God, do we ban too high defenses in the sport because we're not getting enough big plays down the field? It's a lot of nonsense. But the MO for modern defenses in the NFL is prevent the big plays down the field. We're trying to prevent explosive plays in the passing game before forcing all the passes to have to be underneath at least as much as possible. And we're trying to take away explosive in the run game as well. We don't care if you pick up 4 or 5 yards of carry. If you don't hit the big runs, we're happy with that. And the point Nate was making is a guy like Jeremiah Love is you can try that approach with him, but he's going to turn some of those runs into big plays. And in an era where the defenses are all about preventing big plays, having a guy that can create big plays is invaluable to an offense. If at any given time this guy can get the football and it turns into a touchdown, you want guys like that in your team. I say all that to bring it back to Brennan. Brennan provides that because I don't care if you play too high against Brennan Thompson. Brennan Thompson's going to run past those DBs. And while he's probably never going to be the featured number 1 receiver on the team, he is a guy that because he's on the field, you can't not have a safety shielded, safety shifted to his side of the field, shaded. You have to have a safety over to his side to have somebody trying to help over top. Well, guess what? Whoever the number 1 receiver is, number 1 target on the team is, excuse me, he just got a more favorable matchup. And if he's a guy that a couple times a game, you're just sending him on as a go ball, even if it's for the love of the game route. Like, hey, you're not getting the ball here, but you're designed to just go and hold off coverage. He can do that. Obviously, he's explosive enough to help in special teams too. So Brennan, his speed, running what he did and just confirming that and putting a time on out there, I think he's got a great chance to be a day 2 pick. And, yeah, he's going to be State's first receiver trait taken in 30 years, which is crazy. That's the streak. I want to check and see where that stands. I'm sure there's G5 programs, obviously, that haven't had guys taken in that long, but I would love to know Power Conference, if anybody has a longer stretch of not having a receiver drafted than Mississippi State. It's been pretty rough, right, going this long without it. But he's going to end that streak for sure. And really happy for him to go out and be in the spotlight, post the time that he did. And, yeah, he probably just made himself a little bit more money. I think he's going to be a guy that hears his name called some point on day 2 would be my expectation. We'll figure out more as we get closer to the draft. Maybe I can try to get somebody on to who covers the draft a little bit to preview where he ultimately lands when it comes time. Bulldog baseball 2-1 out in Arlington. And look, I mean, they looked every bit the part of a great team. Handled Arizona State, obviously a slow start in that game, but then they really get rolling. Took it to Virginia Tech, and then battled in a crazy game against UCLA. I saw a good bit of it. I didn't see, I don't remember when I turned it on because that was the one that somebody was streaming it illegally on YouTube. So, of course, I tuned in and watched. I don't know when I ultimately ended up putting that on. But, see State it was tied. It was tied at 3. State's able to take the lead and obviously have the 2-run lead going to the 9th. Brutal situation there that you have a hit by pitch and then give up a home run. But then obviously what happens in the bottom of the 10th is just crushing, man. They won the game. They got screwed. I tweeted out, I haven't been PO'd about a baseball game in a long time. I stopped putting my energy towards that. and this is almost one to not get upset about because like you lost in extra innings by 1 run to the number 1 team in the country. I didn't see the end of it. I turned it off because I was mad. I've got my own issues, and I had places I had to be, but that one got to me, man, and it's frustrating because you know they should have been. They should be the number 1 team in the country as we're talking right now. Easily should have been the number 1 team in the country as we're talking right now. And just it didn't work for them. Now, obviously, look, they made mistakes in that game with the walks, the hit by pitch. You just were not fully sharp pitching throughout the day, or at least situationally. I know the base running stuff has been a big thing with this team throughout the season, but look, you battled down to the wire with a great team at a neutral site. 1 run lost to the number 1 team in the country in extra innings. You showed you belong, and they're clearly a title contender with what we've seen. McPherson and Valencius as your top arms really have been impressive to this point. And then the lineup is just as talented as can be and so deep and so strong. They're a great team, and it's going to be a lot of fun watching them as the season goes along. Shout out to softball. They go out to Clemson, and I know they took the loss to the Tigers in the one game, but they get the win and end up winning that event. Haven't seen where the updated rankings are for them, but I'd imagine they're hovering around top 15. So they continue to be off to a great start to the season and kind of add a quality win by beating Clemson because they had mostly been beaten up on some lesser teams, but to go on the road and get that done, Sam Ricketts got herself a good squad once again. Basketball, both men's and women's. I mean, that was embarrassing for the men's team. I didn't watch a second of it, and I'll be honest, I'm refraining from commenting much on basketball right now after what happened last week. Just because I know if I say anything right now, I'm probably going to get crap thrown my way because of it. But yeah, it's getting blown out like that. It's tough. I'm not going to blame anybody for being upset. I still don't think you're at all talking about a world where Chris Jans is getting fired after this year. Even if they were to lose out the rest of the way and it'd be ugly, I still think he'll get another year to turn it around. But the way they're closing the season out right now, it's going to be hard to get any sort of excitement for that team going into next year, even with Hubbard back. They really need to get some things figured out if they're going to have any sort of optimism moving forward. And for the women's team, that's so to be in the position that they were in and down the stretch, you take the losses that you did. And I understand, look, there's a lot of young faces, a lot of new faces in that team, and maybe it just ran out of gas. Maybe there's a lot of, those players having to learn how to close out the season. I don't know. But they're at a spot now. They're not going to the tournament unless they win the SEC tournament, which is just not going to happen. Disappointing because they were in position where a couple wins over mediocre teams that for the course of the season state has been better than, they'd be a tournament team. And it's not going to happen now. Frustrating close for sure. Just not a great time for shooty hoops in Starkville. All right, my voice is shot, and that kind of covers all the news of the weekend. I know there was the news today with the House bill or whatever for income tax on NIL. I'll try to have more thoughts on that later as we get into the week. I'll probably we'll talk about it some on SEC at the Voice of College Football, I'm sure. So go check out that channel as well. Subscribe to SEC at the Voice of College Football. But yeah, I'll be back here Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central Time for the call-in show. I don't know what the topic's going to be just yet, but you guys are also more than welcome to come be a part of the action and lead the discussion where you want it to go. But yeah, if you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel, have the notifications turned on so you do know we do go live. And as always, swing your sword.
Hey, y'all. This is Grant Sashery of LSU at the Voice of College Football Network. I'm here today to announce that the Voice of College Football Network now has its official website. It's been uploaded so you can look at all the latest news and content from the Voice of College Football Network. You can also look at different forums, channels, shows, and it has to show all the show schedules right here and the host. Make sure to check out the Voice of College Football's new website at vocfb.com. Once again, vocfb.com.